Okay, I believe I'm live. Hello and welcome to Calmly Coping Live. In today's episode, I am live here. I have some pre submitted questions. And if there's anybody that's shown up in the chat and has questions, I can also address any of those questions that come up as well, time given. So I have a bunch of questions that I want to get through today regarding high functioning anxiety, anxiety in general, a question on hurry sickness, um, how to how does social anxiety look for an extrovert? And so I have 8 questions listed here that I want to get through today. So before I get into those questions, I just want to quickly announce that until tomorrow, so this is today, Tuesday, March 21st, until Wednesday, March 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. I have a deal that's going on. It's $100 off of my signature program to overcome high functioning anxiety, calm, balanced, and confident. In this program, I guide you through the 3 phase process to help you to feel calmer from within, to help you to achieve improved balance in your life, and to help you to feel more confident from within and good enough from within. So if you're interested in this program and learning more about it while this deal is going on, you can go to calmlycoping.com/enroll. You can also check out the link in the description or the show notes because I'm going to be putting this episode on my podcast after I go live here to get all of the details. So now let's head over to the questions. So first I have, what is the difference between general anxiety and high functioning anxiety? And this is a question that I get asked so much. And really, the difference is in the level of functioning. So, high functioning anxiety is called that for the reason that with high functioning anxiety are, well, they tend to be high achievers and they tend to be people who appear to be successful and high achieving and doing well on the outside. So you have it all together. So maybe you have a job, you're doing well in your career, you're doing well with your family, etc. So you're able to care for yourself and function in your day to day. The difference between that and something like generalized anxiety disorder is just in what the difference of what defines most mental health disorders is that they are significantly negatively impacting your life or your day-to-day functioning. And so with generalized anxiety disorder, for example, the symptoms that you might be experiencing of anxiety, whether it is the worrying and negative thinking or the physical symptoms that you might be experiencing, are resulting in making it more difficult for you to get things done in your day to day. So maybe whether it's work, whether it's relationships, whether it's caring for yourself. So that is really the difference. However, there can be people with high functioning anxiety that maybe they're just kind of white knuckling it through and really struggling. And even though there is the appearance that they're doing well, they may still fall into the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder. So, if this is something that you're wondering for yourself, my recommendation is to find a mental health professional in your area and reach out to them, set up an appointment or set up a consultation and see their thoughts and their advice. Honestly, most of the time it doesn't necessarily matter what is the specific diagnosis. Of course, that lays the groundwork for the type of support you're going to need. But whether it's generalized anxiety or high functioning anxiety, um, many providers that you're working with are going to understand what it is that you need to work on in order to get to a point where you're not suffering as much and the anxiety isn't getting in your way. So that is really the main difference between GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and HFA. So another question kind of related to this that I got was, is ADHD and OCD connected to high functioning anxiety? So one thing is that with high functioning anxiety, there's no real research on it. So that's not something that I can tell you that's, supported by any studies or statistics or research or anything like that, because it really is something that has come about over the past, I'm not sure how long exactly, 10 or so years. And it isn't something that has been really studied or researched. However, I can speak to the connection between ADHD and OCD and anxiety in general. So, one thing is that individuals with ADHD are more likely to have an anxiety disorder than individuals without that condition. So that is something that is, an important thing that has been researched. And when it comes to OCD and anxiety, so OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, actually used to be considered an anxiety disorder. However, as of the most recent version of the DSM, which is basically the manual for anxiety, mental health disorders for psychologists and psychiatrists, then OCD is no longer considered an anxiety disorder. So the reason why is because with OCD, so it comprises of obsessions. So it's obsessive compulsive disorder. So there can be obsessions that you experience. So those are intrusive thoughts, things like, if I don't check the stove, then there's going to be a fire or something bad's going to happen. That's just an example. And then compulsions. So this is the important distinction between OCD and an anxiety disorder is the compulsions that you engage in. So there's some form of checking behavior or other sort of ritualistic behavior that results as a result of these obsessions. So maybe it's constantly checking to make sure the stove is off, or constantly checking to make sure the door is locked, or, other forms of OCD can be constantly checking to make sure, like a result on the internet. So it can look like different things for different people depending on what the obsessions are that you have personally. But that is really the difference. And OCD many times does have, people with OCD many times do have anxiety, but it's not a necessary part of it. So, hopefully that helps to explain the difference between the two, but there can also be overlap in, people with OCD can have symptoms of anxiety because of the overlap between having the worrisome thoughts that can sometimes be similar to those obsessions that are occurring with OCD. So, next question that I have is how to handle anxiety when it's your first time being pregnant. So, this person is 7 weeks in, and she says the racing thoughts and lack of answers is causing so much insomnia. So, I've been watching the TV show Mad Men, and in one of the episodes, his wife was giving birth, and I think he was giving advice to somebody else that was in the waiting room because this TV show takes place in the 60s, and back then, men weren't coming into the delivery room with their wives or, who was giving birth. So he stated this one line, and I was like, I need to write that down. He said, "Our worst fears lie in anticipation." And I could not agree more because when there is the uncertainty. So inherent with anticipation is uncertainty. It's that idea that you don't know what's going to happen. And when you're somebody who may be prone to anxiety, oftentimes the focus can be on the worst thing that can happen. So then your mind can tend to go there, like the worst case scenario. And so then you're worrying about this and trying to plan for this and trying to prepare for this. And all of this anticipation can create this buildup of all of these worrisome thoughts. And then that can create those difficult physical symptoms that come with anxiety, the difficulty relaxing, maybe the heart beating quickly, maybe digestive issues. So, whatever that can look like or feel like for you. So, it can feel really uncomfortable. And especially this person is saying that they're struggling with insomnia. So, first, I want to validate that being, especially I think early on in your pregnancy, and depending upon um, for this person, it's their first time being pregnant, but for other people, maybe they have had experiences with, a miscarriage or something else in the past that can make it more challenging. It's, I think, entirely normal to have that feeling of worry and, um, you know, not being certain about what's going to happen and wanting to be sure of the safety for yourself and your baby. So I think it's important, keeping that in mind to focus on what you can do to take care of yourself and your baby, rather than the worst case scenario. So if you notice your mind is going to the worst case scenario, uh, recognizing that and then actually looking at and challenging that, like, are these thoughts actually likely? Is this something that is actually, the whole picture of what I'm looking at, or am I just focused on the negative, to help to put things into perspective? And I think another thing is to think of, rather than what's the worst that can happen, what's the best that can happen? And what would that look like and feel like for you? And then when it comes to insomnia, I think it can help to have a relaxing evening routine that you're trying to reduce stress as much as possible. So, not checking the news or checking your email or things like that that might bring up more stress and anxiety, but just focusing on what are things that help you to feel relaxed, help you to feel present. And if you're still finding that worries are going through your mind, I think this can apply for anybody who's struggling with insomnia or difficulty sleeping because of anxiety. I think it can help to have a journal next to your bed and to just write down what are the things that are worrying you. Now, some people fear, okay, if I'm writing these things down, then I'm just going to start worrying about them more. But actually, many times it can be the opposite, because this can be a form of release and a way to get these things out of your head onto paper and tell yourself, okay, I'm going to leave these worries in this journal for the night, and then I can return to them in the morning, or, when there's a time that I can address these things, if ever. So, it can help to write down what are those things going on in your mind. And then also, this is something I recently taught in my membership community. We're doing a monthly journaling challenge for March. That idea of, like, wrapping it up with a bow. So if you find that when you're journaling, getting all of the stresses out is like really overwhelming and challenging, that can be a sign that those are things that you maybe needed to get out and needed to process. And is it possible for you to end that journaling of, writing down those stresses and worries with, okay, how can I get some perspective in this situation? How can I speak to myself like I would to a friend? And maybe it's just writing something like, I'm choosing to let go of these worries for tonight, allow myself restful sleep, and I'll return to them in the morning. Or maybe it's just, it's okay to feel this way, and, giving yourself some sort of statement of compassion and support. Okay, so the next question that I have: is there any progress towards high functioning anxiety or high functioning depression being classified or recognized in the DSM? So, the DSM, I mentioned that previously in the first question that I was addressing, is that Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders. So, basically, where all mental health disorders are organized and classified. So, there's kind of two questions or two answers to this. Is, one, I haven't, as far as I know, seen that there is any action that people are taking to try and get high functioning anxiety or high functioning depression in the DSM. And I think that is really just due to the nature of how they influence you. And because it is just inherently in how it is defined, not something that is negatively impacting with people's day-to-day functioning. Now, you could argue that it is impacting people in the way that they're feeling internally. And that is absolutely true. And if that is the case, then you should absolutely get support for it. Um, and if that is happening, then I think you would benefit from the support of, whether it is a therapist or whether it is a supportive community or whatever that looks like for you. So, even though people with high functioning anxiety appear high functioning, it doesn't mean that they don't classify for some sort of diagnosis in the DSM. So, whether that is generalized anxiety disorder, like I mentioned, or post traumatic stress disorder, or social anxiety disorder, or panic disorder. So, I think, this is something to be aware of, but, especially if you're not a person who is in the mental health profession, not necessarily something that needs to be focused on, because If you're in a place where you're struggling and needing support for these things, there are options for you, whether or not high functioning anxiety is something that falls into the DSM. Okay, but that's a great question. So, next question is how to apply strategies to cope with hurry sickness. So, I did a previous podcast on hurry sickness, and it's basically that sense of urgency or that desire that I need to get all of these things done. And so, I need to use any possible empty space to accomplish things. And that kind of idea that everything feels urgent. So this person is saying, they feel like they need some sort of stimuli to work. So like music or background noise, but still finding the calm or wanting that calm to get through a task. So for instance, for those of us who are prone to trying to multitask, are there strategies specific to break down our urge to do this while still satisfying that preference for working with something in the background? Okay. So a few things. Let's say if you're the person who finds that you have the tendency to multitask, maybe you find that you want to focus on one thing and then, get distracted by doing another thing. Um, if that's you, then I think what can be really helpful is one simple thing. Let's say it's you're wanting to respond to emails and you find that you tend to multitask and go from one thing to the next. And um, it's something that you want to just do more intentionally and more focused, setting a timer can be really helpful. This is something that's really helpful for me. So I will set a timer, let's say, depending on how long I want to spend doing the thing. So maybe it's 60 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes. Setting a timer, playing some sort of music or something that you enjoy that won't be too distracting. This is going to be different for everybody. For some people, music is going to be super distracting and it's going to make it harder to get things done. For other people, music can actually help them to focus more. And it can also depend on the kind of music. So, it depends on is it instrumental music or is it music that has vocals? And the vocals, because you're listening to the words, that can be distracting. So, find what works best for you and then set that timer and with the intention of I'm just going to focus on this one thing. And then you can have that background music or whatever as something that's going to help to keep you present and focused in the moment. And I think it also can depend on what is the specific task and how are you feeling? Because sometimes there can be this desire to multitask because it feels like, not because it feels like, but because there is this actual urgency of this thing needs to get done. And if that's the case, I think it can help to remember that multitasking doesn't exist. And actually, when we are multitasking, our brain is constantly task switching. So we're going from one task to the next, and that actually requires more mental energy and more time for you to refocus on the thing. So if you're finding that there's urges to multitask, I think it can help to remind yourself multitasking isn't helping me to get things more quickly. It's actually just taking more time. There are forms of multitasking that can help. So let's say, that's when it's something that you're doing that is maybe doesn't require a lot of brain power. So maybe you're like doing chores or something and then you have a podcast on or an audiobook in the background. Those are forms of multitasking that you're not necessarily like mentally switching from one thing to the next. So it really depends on what the task is doing. So looking at how much mental energy is this going to take for me? And if it's something that requires a lot of brain power for you to do, like a lot of thinking, then I would suggest not multitasking with that, whether it's setting the timer or creating some sort of environment where you're just focusing on that one thing and then moving on to the next thing, because that's going to help you to get things done much more efficiently. Okay, now kind of switching gears to social anxiety. So, somebody asked me, what does social anxiety look like for an extrovert? I think this is a great question because I think a lot of times there is this association that people with social anxiety tend to be people who are introverted and that these are one and the same when that's not the case. So, just a quick definition, the difference between an introvert and an extrovert is that an introvert is a person who tends to enjoy time by themselves and tends to require and become recharged by that time for by themselves. And they tend to find that time around people can be draining. Now, of course, this is a spectrum. So most people are going to fall somewhere in the middle, but that would be the extreme end of introversion. And then extroversion is the opposite. So it is when somebody is recharged by spending time around other people and they can find it draining to spend time on their own. So there can certainly be extroverts who have social anxiety. And what that might look like is maybe you enjoy being around people, but you worry, are they judging me? Do they like me? It can be this desire to want to be liked by others. It could be maybe you want company when going out because you feel uncomfortable being by yourself and worry about people might maybe thinking negative things about you. It could be the desire to be entertaining and to be interesting to other people. So of course there's going to be overlap here in what it looks like for an extrovert versus an introvert, but I think those can be some things that might be showing up in what an extrovert might experience with social anxiety. So, another question that this person asked was, what does shyness feel like, and how do you truly know the difference between what normal shyness is and what is not? So, I looked up a definition of shy. So, we could all be on the same page, but shy is being reserved or having or showing nervousness or timidity in the company of other people. So it's really this discomfort when you're around other people. And I think it's the difference between being nervous and uncomfortable versus is that getting to the point of anxiety? Because there is a difference there. Because it's, when you're nervous, you have this anticipation of, or this feeling of, I feel a little uncomfortable in this situation. And it certainly doesn't feel fun. However, anxiety can be kind of a more extreme version of that where you feel extremely uncomfortable. There are very strong negative thoughts and worries and potential judgments that you're having towards yourself. There's a lot of physical symptoms that you might be experiencing, and you may be avoiding these types of situations. So maybe you're avoiding being around other people because it brings up so much anxiety for you. So there can certainly be an overlap between somebody who's shy and somebody who has social anxiety, but that is not necessarily the case. You can be shy and not have social anxiety and well, actually, I'm pretty sure people who actually, let me correct that. I just like went through this whole thing in my mind. Because people with social anxiety can be extroverted, um, you may not necessarily be shy, but you may just have these negative thoughts and worries about, okay, what are people thinking about me? And so you may still be nervous in a situation, but you may not necessarily avoid it in the way that, somebody who is shy might, or it may be less of a preference because you enjoy being around other people in general or want to be around other people. So I hope that that difference makes sense when it comes to that. And anybody who's here live can feel free to chime in if you have any thoughts or any other questions. Next is an excellent question. So this is, what kind of therapist do you look for when looking for help with high functioning anxiety, and what do they need to specialize in? So I think when it comes to a therapist, it can be really confusing and overwhelming for people because there's therapists, there's psychologists, there's psychiatrists. And so, just to break down quickly the difference between those, a therapist is anybody who does talk therapy. And so that is when you are, sitting in a meeting about like 45 to 60 minutes, let's say once a week. Of course, the frequency is going to differ. The way people conduct therapy is going to differ in their approach, but it's really the form of helping to talk through things that are keeping you stuck, and whether it's mental health disorder, relationship struggles, whatever it might be, and help you to learn tools to cope with those things. So, when it comes to talk therapy, there can be therapists such as myself. I'm a licensed professional counselor, so I have a master's degree and that license that allows me to practice therapy. There can be a licensed clinical social worker. So that's somebody who, again, is a master's level and they get licensed in clinical social work. There can be, it varies by state and region. So depending on where you are, There's licensed mental health counselors. There are licensed marriage and family therapists. So those tend to be level clinicians that are all very similar. They may have just different specialties when they're in graduate school. And then there is a psychologist. So a psychologist is somebody who is has a doctorate degree. And they tend to have more of a background in providing assessments for clients. And they can also provide talk therapy as well. So they have that background and training. And then when you look at psychiatrists, so that is a medical doctor, and that is somebody who is providing typically medication, and they can provide a diagnosis for you, and they're not necessarily going to be helping you when it comes to talk therapy. There are psychiatrists that do offer that. However, much of the time it is more just medication management. So you can go to a psychiatrist if you're wanting to start medication, if you're not sure if you need medication, and so they can help you through that process. So then when it comes to if you're looking for a therapist, what should they specialize in? So there are so many different specialties that therapists have and different approaches. I think that what tends to be kind of the gold standard for anxiety treatment is what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And so that can be something that's beneficial to look for in a therapist, somebody who has a background in cognitive behavioral therapy. I think another helpful background when it comes to anxiety are mindfulness approaches. So somebody maybe has a training in mindfulness based cognitive therapy or mindfulness based practices. Those can be really helpful, especially for high functioning anxiety. And then, depending on your own history, it's going to look different. So, let's say if you have a history of trauma, whether it is a traumatic childhood or a traumatic experience that you've had, or any other sort of experience, then I think it can always be helpful to have somebody who has a background in trauma informed practices, because that's going to be really helpful, because a lot of times that informs the rest of your treatment and the rest of the support that you're getting. So I think that's really important. And then as far as resources, there are so many directories out there to find therapists. A few good ones are Psychology Today, Therapy Den. There's also one called Inclusive Therapists. So this is if you are looking for somebody who works with or is themselves maybe somebody, a person of color, or somebody who works with different sexual orientation or gender identity. So that is a great resource for that, because I think it can be really important depending on who you are and who you feel comfortable with, maybe wanting somebody that might understand your experience. So those can be things that are important to look for in a therapist as well. And thank you so much for the comments. So somebody said, I think you're doing a great job. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay. So next question I have is, I would like to know, how do you stop stress affecting your body? So I have a lot of tools in my box, but stress and body are intertwined for me. And this is so common because stress and our emotions can show up physically. And especially if, in our sedentary lives now, a lot of us are sitting down all day and not moving our bodies. That can sometimes make it so that stress is showing up even more, and this tension can be building up in our bodies. I think one important thing is having more mindfulness, more awareness of how stress shows up in your body. So, for example, for me personally, I tend to notice when I'm feeling particularly stressed about something or worried about something, that I can notice the tension in my hips, and like I tend to tighten the muscles in my hips. Or I noticed the other day when I was going for a run, I kept like tensing my shoulder, and it was something that was just happening unconsciously, but I noticed it and I'm like, okay, this is happening right now. And the reason why that can happen is for different reasons, but sometimes it can be a thought that comes up, and then, that thought creates a physical reaction in your body, because um and hold on, before I get to what I was going to say, it can also be an emotion that comes up, and that again creates a physical response in our body. So because the thought can lead to the emotion, which creates the physical response, our emotions are drivers for action. Okay. And that is their function, their purpose. So when we have an emotion and we're not taking action on it because maybe it's something that is an imagined fear or worry, or we're thinking about something in the future, or we're not taking physical action on it, then that's why we can have this tension and stress that builds up. So because of that, you might notice, oh, my shoulders are really tensed, like they're going up to my ears, or like I have all this tension in my upper back or my lower back or whatever it might be. It's because you're experiencing these emotions and your body is sending these signals to certain muscles or certain areas of your body to take action in some way, but we're not necessarily taking action because in our modern lives, it's not a situation where we're running away from a lion and our body needs to take action to get away from the stressful situation. Many times, these stressful situations are in our minds, or many times they are in the computer in front of us or in something that can't necessarily be acted upon. So, having that in your awareness, then it can help to, I think, just periodically through the day, you can have even a reminder. I like to put like post it notes as reminders for myself, maybe to just release tension, relax. So this can just look like a simple 2-minute practice where you notice, oh, I'm starting to notice that I'm tensing this muscle or that this tension is showing up in my body. Okay. And so then you can breathe into it. So this can look like taking a deep breath into whatever the area is where you have that tension, and then imagining the breath is going into that area, and then exhaling deeply, making it a long exhale. And as you exhale, imagining that the tension is releasing and imagining it's like that tension is dripping down into the floor. If you want to visualize something different, whatever that looks like for you. And you can continue this as many breaths as you want, and sometimes the tension won't completely release. Um, and if that happens, that's okay. Because sometimes wanting to release tension can actually create more tension. So if you find that you're getting stuck in that cycle, just being okay with, okay, this is what's here right now. And then in the long term, I think it can help to have some sort of practice where you are physically moving your body. So maybe that is doing yoga or daily stretching or some other form of exercise that's going to allow you to get out that tension and energy. And then, because emotions can build up in the body, that's when it can help to address it from those two ways. So the first is the physical, and the second is the mental and the psychological. So, do you have some sort of outlet for your emotions, for your thoughts? So, whether it's writing in a journal, whether it's meditating, whether it's talking to a friend or family member or therapist or whatever that might be, having some sort of outlet so that all of this stress isn't continuing to build up in your body. Okay, so I hope that that was helpful for that question. And then um, another question that I got, and I have somebody asking where are people posting questions. So these questions that I'm answering, I got in advance. If you have any questions for me now, then definitely post it in the comments and I will address that. So, other question, somebody who has IBS, and then after having diarrhea, they feel full and get irritated and dizzy. How can they deal with this? So, first, I want to clarify I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't speak to IBS specifically. However, one thing is that stress and anxiety can result in digestive issues. And this is actually something that's common. That is because when we're in a place of chronic stress or anxiety, it results in a lot of physical reactions in our body. So our body goes into what's called fight or flight. And then this is when your body is telling you, okay, it's time to get away from some sort of danger. So your heart starts beating more quickly. You might start breathing more shallowly. The tension and blood goes through your extremities to get you ready to run away if you have to. Um, and then your digestion as a result slows down because your body is just focused on how can I survive. Digesting food is not a priority at this time. So that's why stress and anxiety can result in those digestive issues. So if you're a person who is in this place, I think what can be helpful is to remember that decreasing stress and anxiety is going to help with those digestive issues. So whatever that looks like for you. So resting, allowing your body to recover if you've been in this place of having these digestive issues, doing what you can to release any sort of stress or tension physically, like I just spoke about in the previous question. Um, and also just allowing your body to recover and, getting nutrition in whatever way that looks like for you, depending on what's going on for you physically. This person also mentioned feeling like a burden when they sleep because they get sleepy and, they're taking care of their grandsons, but they feel as though they're a burden when they sleep. And I think this can be something that's common. And I want to kind of ask, is this something that you have heard? Because many times it's not that other people see us as a burden, but it's that we feel that way ourselves. And so questioning, am I really a burden or am I just worried that I am? And so if that's the case, just reminding yourself that you deserve to rest and you deserve to recharge, and these signals from our body, so whether it's digestive issues, whether it is tension, whatever it might be, look at these as signals. So these can be signals that something needs to change. So whether it is something externally or maybe it's something internally in the way that you are navigating the world around you. Maybe you're focusing more on the self-doubt and the negativity and the what could go wrong rather than the bigger picture of the situation. So again, this is going to look different for every situation, but seeing these physical these physical symptoms you might be experiencing as signals and signs that what is it that I need in this moment? What is it that I can do to care for myself? And it does not have to be something that is super, long winded and that you need to spend tons of time caring for yourself or doing things. Just sometimes a simple check in can help. Like, how am I feeling right now? What are my thoughts like right now? What am I feeling physically right now? Okay. And then once you've recognized that, then asking yourself, how can I do or take one action or one step to help myself to calm my mind and my body more? So maybe it is if you're having a lot of physical tension, going for a walk outside. If you are really focusing on the negative, maybe it is um, writing down all of these worries and looking at it from a different perspective, or speaking to a close, like, loved one or support to get these things out and have a sounding board. So, looking at how am I feeling? What is this telling me? And how can I manage this in the situation? How can I change the way that I'm feeling? Okay, so those are the pre-submitted questions I have. I will hang around for like a minute or two if anybody else who is showing up live has any questions. So, while I wait, if there are any additional questions, I just wanted to remind everybody again that enrollment is open for my signature program to overcome high functioning anxiety, calm, balanced, and confident. So there is $100 off until tomorrow, Wednesday, March 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And Calm, Balanced, and Confident walks you through exactly how to overcome high functioning anxiety as a high achieving professional. So I touch on a lot of the stuff that I just spoke about. So, how to become more aware of your thoughts, emotions, how to manage and decrease anxiety, how to look at beliefs that might be getting in your way, beliefs like I always need to be busy or everything is urgent, and really getting to the root of what these struggles are so that you can feel calmer from within. And then also looking at your work life balance and setting boundaries. So, making it so that you are actually taking the time that you need to care for yourself and showing up as your best self, being productive when it comes to work, whatever that looks like for you, whether you're a student, whether you're a working professional, whether you're currently on a break from work or school. And then looking at how can you challenge self-doubt, because I know a lot of people with high functioning anxiety have self-doubt, become more confident and learn those tools and skills that you need to feel confident from within. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to calmlycoping.com/enroll, or check out the description to see the link for that. Okay, so I have somebody in the comments. So I've worked a lot with accepting and allowing, and it has changed things for me drastically. But the low key constant anxiety is less straightforward to face. Yeah, that's definitely, an important thing. And I think that that is great that you have that things have changed for you when it comes to accepting and allowing things. And sometimes there can be that background feeling of anxiety and worry. And, if that's the case for you, I think it can help to, it seems counterintuitive, but again, like you mentioned, the accepting and allowing, if you can accept that background anxiety and just see it as rather than a problem that needs to be fixed. Okay, what's going on here? And is this actually reflective of the fact that I need to be worried? Or maybe, many times, especially if this is something you're a person who is in the beginning stages of working on things, or you've just started to notice changes, many times it can be a result of your brain just needs to catch up. And you need to continue practicing doing things like, allowing whatever is here to be here, facing your fears in certain situations, and actually teaching your brain that, okay, you don't need to be on. You don't need to be on edge because it's going to be okay. Sometimes it can take time for your physical body and like that primitive portion of your brain that reacts to and is trying to predict something going wrong to catch up to the more conscious part of our brains. And that's why sometimes we can notice that, okay, cognitively, I know these thoughts aren't rational and I know that I don't need to feel anxious right now, but sometimes you can still have those feelings coming up because it's kind of like that primitive portion of your brain is still catching up and is still maybe caught in this habitual place of feeling anxious because that's what you've been used to. And so I think what can help with that is just continuing with the consistency because it doesn't mean that you're not doing things right or that it's not working. It could just mean that you need to continue to teach your brain that even if I'm feeling anxious, I can do these things, whatever that looks like for you. I can do things out of my comfort zone. Everything's going to be okay. And teaching yourself that I can cope with this and, I'm able to manage these difficult feelings and emotions. Um, but yeah, the person also said it's just there in the background generating negative or obsessive thoughts, and it's not big enough for me to see and face. So, what to do at this stage? So, yeah, what I just shared, I think will be helpful. And then also just depending on what it is that your focus is, maybe looking more at that. So, many times we tend to have different triggers and different focuses for our thoughts. And a lot of times they can be the same things over and over again. And so I think it might be helpful to just become aware of, okay, if there are specific things, specific thoughts, what are they? Identifying them. So maybe that's writing them down, and bringing them to awareness. So these are the types of thoughts I tend to have. So, for example, for me, sometimes my thoughts tend to go to this place of self doubt, and I get into like this negative spiral of like, I'm not good enough, or kind of those kinds of thoughts. And I notice that that's a pattern for me. And because of that, when it does come up, I don't always catch it right away, but when I do catch it, I recognize, okay, this is that pattern. This is that tape that goes on for me that gets me into this place of self doubt and, focusing on the negative. And I know this is a pattern that I have. So I try to create some separation from it and see it as rather than this is something that needs to be believed or this is something that needs to be fixed, just noticing okay, this is that pattern that tends to come up for me when I'm in a place where I'm in this certain type of mood or there's a certain type of trigger. And so, because I know that's where my mind tends to go, I can realize this is not the truth. This is just my mind trying to protect me and keep me safe because I'm trying to anticipate maybe criticism or rejection or feedback, like the things that I am afraid of and the things that I think many people are afraid of. So sometimes just recognizing, okay, maybe saying that's the tape that's playing, depending on how old you are, is kind of a dated thing, but I like to see it as like this is the cassette tape that's playing over and over again in my mind. And how can I notice that and just hit stop and realize that, okay, this is just an old pattern that's no longer serving me. So how can I let go of that and then move on to something else and replace this? The key is replacing it. So how can I replace this with a new way of thinking and kind of that a more positive or realistic belief? Okay. So I hope that that was helpful in addressing that question, but that was an excellent question. Thanks so much for asking it. And if you wanted me to do these types of lives where I come on and answer your questions regularly, then definitely let me know and I can schedule another one in advance. Thank you so much for everybody who showed up today. And I hope that you are having a great day. I hope you have a great rest of your day. So I will be ending the live stream for now. But thanks again, everybody, for showing up. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.